Hey everyone, I'm Jay and I do stuff. In addition to being characterized as a token Kirby and Pokemon, mostly Porygon fanatic, I'm also quite an avid Rayman fan as well. Rayman is a 2D and 3D platforming series from Ubisoft, known these days for titles such as Assassin's Creed and The Raving Rabbids. But back in the day though, Rayman was one of their top mascots. He was pretty much Ubisoft's equivalent to Mario. Rayman was also one of the very first games I ever played on my first ever gaming console, the original PlayStation 1. Now you're probably wondering why I hardly even talk about or make any content in regards to Rayman. Well, I would if there was anything new to grab my attention and get me hyped, but Rayman has an unfortunate tendency to be completely forgotten about and brushed to the side, no matter how many times he briefly comes back into relevancy. But with his most recent comeback in the DLC for Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope, it got me thinking back to some of the older Rayman material I've had since I was young. One of which being this old VHS tape of this short-lived Rayman cartoon. But debatably more than the actual show itself, I have more memories of this Ubisoft promotional skit highlighting 3 specific titles for the Nintendo 64. Those being Rayman 2, Tonic Trouble, and Rocket Robot on Wheels. I already had Rayman 2 at the time, but this fascinated me so much that I also ended up getting Tonic Trouble and Rocket as well. Keep in mind I first saw this in 2006 or so, long after the discontinuation of the Nintendo 64. When I did manage to get the rest of the games, used by the way, I played Tonic Trouble first and didn't get too far into it. I don't know, it wasn't that it was hard, but rather I couldn't really get into it and lost interest. Also, it required the Nintendo 64 memory card add-on, which I didn't have at the time, so I couldn't save. I did play Rocket for a bit longer though. A couple standout moments for me were this roller coaster builder slash simulator a la Roller Coaster Tycoon. There was also this other level where you could change and mix and match the colors of Rocket himself. You could even take these colors out to different levels. But sooner or later I lost interest and never got around to playing them again. Fast forward to decades later now, and recent events result in me starting to think about Rayman again, which then led me to thinking about those other 2 games again, which then led me to thinking about Tonic Trouble specifically. Tonic Trouble was one of the 3 aforementioned games that I played the least, so memories of said game were very faint and few. Still, the game intrigued me with its extremely oddball nature and striking resemblance to Rayman. Look at the characters, none of them have any arms or legs. That's right, you may have thought this was going to be a video talking about Rayman, but it was Tonic Trouble all along! In Tonic Trouble, you play as this goofy-looking purple alien guy named Ed. The basic gist of the game is that
Ed's made a huge mess. He's dumped toxic goo all over the earth and turned it into a very scary place. And it just gets weirder and weirder.
Conceptually, though, Tonic Trouble was made to help Ubisoft better understand 3D game development. Specifically for the at the time upcoming Rayman 2 game. Which, by the way, initially started off as a 2D side-scroller like the first Rayman game. But development quickly shifted over to 3D gameplay due to Sonic's ass game being the new big thing at the time. So in that sense, I like to consider Tonic Trouble the awkward middle phase between Rayman 1 and 2. Having the same general crazy and abstract worlds and characters of the first Rayman, but the 3D graphics and gameplay from Rayman 2. Upon starting up the game, it opens with this in-game cutscene followed by a wall of text with exposition, as if the game is too lazy to actually show us further details. We see this bird-shaped spaceship circling the Earth called the Mothership Albatross. It then cuts to the inside where we see Ed, the ship's go-to janitor, just chillin', doing his janitorial duties by dusting all of what I assume to be all the inventions and artifacts. Just look at how content he is. He then frantically chases down a small bouncing bug, After a fierce struggle, a parched Ed takes a drink of this mysterious can stuff that kinda looks like Mountain Dew. Upon ingesting, the can turns out to not in fact be Mountain Dew, as Ed pukes it up onto a conveniently placed trap door as the screws holding said door gain sentience from the tonic barf and walk out of their screw holes. After a failed attempt to re-grab it, the can falls towards Earth. Meanwhile, on said planet, we see this Viking/barbarian looking guy named Grog chilling in a field by some sheep. The can lands right next to Grog as a small droplet splashes into the riverside, causing the water to turn all rainbow and trippy. The sheep start floating away like balloons as the vegetables start to crawl out of the ground and gain sentience of their own. Grog takes a sip of the can himself and becomes evil or something, I don't know. After we get a good look at Grog's tonsils, we get more walls of text giving out further exposition and explaining the characters. Look at this, it's like the game already ran out of budget in the opening cutscene. After all that, Ed quickly scurries to Earth to fix everything before anyone from his alien race finds out, I presume. Well, that was pretty rushed and uneventful, as if it was slapped together in 5 minutes. At this point, you're probably thinking, wow, the production values for this game were so low that they couldn't even make a better and more engaging intro cutscene giving more motivation and context? I know that's what I thought for the longest time, having played the game so briefly. But what if I told you that all this was only in the Nintendo 64 version? You see, while it was released first on the Nintendo 64, Tonic Trouble was also released on the PC. Also the Game Boy Color version, but I'm not here to talk about that one. The PC version of the game has quite a few significant differences to the Nintendo 64 version that even wowed me at first and opened my eyes a bit more to the game in general. Nearly every review of Tonic Trouble I've seen only talks about the Nintendo 64 version and more often than not knocks the game based off that version alone. Not many people talk about the PC version, so I guess that's where I come in. Starting the PC version up opens with a pre-rendered FMV cutscene, already a huge difference from the N64 version. We see the Albatross ship flying around Earth as it transitions to the inside where we see Ed, now dressed in a full janitor attire, talking about something out of context to a door.
I even saw the 3 sons of Hatul and Ozium being born, but nothing I've seen can compare with the sparkle in your eyes.
We can quickly gather that Ed is trying to confess his love to some girl whom we never actually see, judging by Ed's flower and cliché heart of chocolates. Also, Ed talking about her alleged sparkle in her eyes and...
the sight of your lingerie from Carmani.
This game is rated E, right? He also mentioned someone called Burke, who I assume is another rival love interest.
Burke doesn't deserve you. He's a fungus. A schmoll.
When the door finally opens, we see...
I'm waiting.
I guess this must be Burke. Burke then chases down Ed, swinging some kind of pipe fixture or crowbar. Jeez, isn't that a bit overkill? He only called him a schmoll or whatever that is. Ed uses evasive maneuvers to escape Burke and then hides in some sort of storage room. All alone, Ed breaks down in tears in defeated anguish. Okay, let's back up for a moment. So, when Ed is confessing his feelings, I assume he's at the right dorm. If he was somehow mistakenly at Burke's dorm, I don't think Ed would have been as crushed. But judging by how Burke comes out of this nameless girl alien's room in his underwear and sleepwear, I can only conclude that this girl Ed loves already accepted and probably even just slept with Burke. So this game isn't about some clumsy mishappening. It's a love story. That's what ignites this whole catastrophe. With that realization in mind, in addition to almost getting killed, dang, I'd probably break down in tears as well. That type of pain is something I, for one, know all too well, especially considering Ed being more short and scrawny, as well as his more dorky and awkward character. I freaking feel for this dude. Except for the lingerie part. I have no idea what the context for that is. In his anguish, Ed finds and downs the tonic can to either drink his sorrows away, or off himself due to not wanting to live alone and possibly from past abuse from his alien colleagues. That's dark. But as in the Nintendo 64 version, Ed spits out the tonic and the screws come alive. However, instead of accidentally dropping it, Ed deliberately chugs the can into a garbage chute as it falls out towards Earth. On Earth, we discover that Grog is a drunken bum who gets kicked out of a bar for not paying his tab. The can literally falls into his hands as he drinks and then gets transformed into a Viking. Meanwhile, the tonic contaminates the water as the whole world starts going warped. Back on the Albatross, Ed is taken to court and is sentenced to clean up the Earth. By himself. This general alien guy shows up and, hey, that's the salesman from Rayman 2 who sells Razorbeard the giant girl goth robot. Huh, funny how he never appears in the Nintendo 64 version. The general assigns Ed to reclaim the can from Grog's new fortress. Naturally, Ed messes up the mission. Except not by his own hand, since it's the dinky space pod that malfunctions. But sure, let's blame Ed completely. After that, the general tells Ed that he's essentially on his own now. You know, if they really cared about the planet, you'd think they'd all take it into their own hands. So that's how the game actually starts. I don't know about you, but that opening cutscene alone really hit me. Ed is just a little guy who means well and just yearns for love and compassion. He seems to get the short end of the stick though, being assigned as janitor, getting one-upped by bigger ones of his kind, and is prone to mistreatment without any remorse. Sure, he fumbles all over the place, but it's not like he deliberately has bad intentions. But in this day and age, who cares about intentions, am I right?
Oh, your family is out of control, but we can't blame you because you have good intentions.
It really connected with me on a personal level. I'm pretty much like Ed, as I tend to screw things up for other people's social awkwardness and all. Not to mention, everyone around me already has a significant other, leaving me to endlessly urine my own sorrow and incompetence when trying to find someone to love, for over a decade now. But anyway, this stirred up engagement from me wanting to learn more about the game, especially since it's also a 3D platformer. On to the actual gameplay, both versions pretty much play out the same, so I'll mainly stick with the PC version. The game starts out with a snowboarding segment? Kind of an odd way to start off a 90s 3D platformer, but okay. Though it does kind of remind me of the opening sliding section from Rayman 2. The sliding controls are fine for the most part. I wouldn't say this segment is too challenging. There are these swirling antidotes, which are the game's general collectibles. You collect these throughout the course and can even earn a bunch by beating the record time. But we don't need to worry about these too much right now. After that, we finally get to solid flat ground to run freely on. The first person we meet here is Susie, this purple-skinned girl who has about as much fashion sense as a Flintstones character.
You must be Ed, right? I mean, don't take it bad or anything, but I was expecting someone a little more, well, a bit less purple.
That's saying a lot coming from you. Go back to the friggin' Stone Age. She says we need to free her dad, the doc, from within his underground lab. Talk to Susie again, and she'll just whine at you about saving the doc.
What are you doing here? Go free my father!
Jeez, what a brat. Also, if it wasn't already obvious, the PC version sports full-on voice acting, whereas in the Nintendo 64 version it's just text. The grammar in some of the dialogue can be a bit off-sounding, but the voice acting itself really isn't that bad in my opinion. It's a lot better than the voice acting in Rayman 2 for sure. The fact that there's voice acting at all really adds to the game's immersion. While obviously voice acting shouldn't be that important in games, it does add to the character's charm. While on the subject of sound, the music is kind of a mixed bag for me. A lot of the tracks in the game are very slow and atmospheric sounding. The atmospheric tone is further emphasized in the Nintendo 64 version with its lacking instruments. Though there are a handful of tracks that are wonderful bangers. I absolutely love the main theme for the credits and also the ski slope theme. While down in the underground lab, you learn the basics of Ed's moveset. He can run in a smooth 360 degrees of direction, jump, strafe, and swim. You also find more collectibles like the aforementioned antidotes, gold 1-up heads, bits of liquid mercury, and thermometers to boost your health. Yeah, apparently Ed's alien kind feeds on mercury, which is otherwise toxic for consumption. The liquid bits restore health, while collecting 10 thermometers increase your full health. You're taught these things by Agent XYZ, this newspaper guy who's always whispering.
Slight problem here. The machine's broken.
He's part of this resistance fighting against Grog's army of shirtless balloon men? Later in the level, you'll come across this popcorn machine that turns Ed into a huge macho alien.
Super Ed!
Super Ed is a temporary power-up that makes him effectively invincible, super strong, and best of all, takes away your ability to jump. Wow! You then use Super Ed to beat this robot suitcase mini-boss and free the dock. Upon freeing him, Ed gets a new power. The almighty weapon of the stick. With it, Ed has an actual attack now, being able to swing at enemies and activate certain levers. The doc is so grateful for Ed rescuing him that he agrees to help him stop Grog. At this point, the formula is that Ed needs to collect 6 of certain items in every world. Items such as springs, propeller sticks, jumping stones, feathers, domino pieces, and sentient piggy banks. Each time Ed fetches all 6 of each item, he is awarded a new power to help traverse to the next world. Kinda like in Rayman 1, how Rayman progressively gets new powers throughout the game. Here, Ed gets powers such as shooting bees from his stick, using his bow tie to glide with awkward and heavy flight controls, being able to turn into certain objects, swim underwater, and use his stick as a pogo stick. Each level focuses on platforming, puzzles, and exploration, utilizing several gimmicks to obtain each one of the MacGuffins. You meet up with Susie at the end of each level to ensure you've collected all 6 main items, as well as show off more of her stock girl personality or say something provocative for an E-rated game.
Oh, Eddie, baby! These feathers are wonderful! Just think of all the fun we could have with them. Such a shame my father needs them for his machine.
Around the latter half of the adventure, when you reach the pressure cooker level, you'll come across this pharmacist guy. He basically gives extra exposition of him creating this Grugaola substance from a contaminated pig. He then proceeds to taunt you about getting back the tonic can and how he'll mutate everyone on Earth. Well, that was weird. Not even Ed fully understood all that. But I have a feeling it was trying to allude to something. Later in the pressure cooker, you'll run into this mushroom mage who steals your last main pig collectible. However, in order to infiltrate his secret hideout, you'll need to have collected every single antidote in the game. In the likely case which you haven't gotten them all, that means backtracking. Another similarity to Rayman 1, where you need to break all the cages to access the last level. Except here it'd be like collecting every single blue ting in that game. When you do get to the Mushroom Mage, you'll then face off in this underwhelming boss fight and Language Mushroom Mage. Once defeated, it's time to be catapulted into Grog's land, bringing on some of the toughest challenges and puzzles, or at least thus far. Once you reach Grog's main fortress, it grows hands and feet as it stomps its way underground? You fall right after him, and the first phase of the final fight has you being chased by this piloted tower. After you escape, you go into phase 2 where the Grog Tower slowly approaches from the background while these boulders keep rolling past. Here you need to use Super Ed to knock these boulders into Grog, knocking him back before he can crush you, OHKOing you instantly. Actually, this phase kinda reminds me of the final Bowser fight in Yoshi's Island. The third and final phase is where things really start to get involved. You're in this volcano area and the platform you're on starts sinking. You need to glide around and shoot at all the targets to get the platform to re-arise. Then you need to hit the falling rocks at Grog, knocking him down. Finally, take out your pea shooter and snipe him through the little opening in the tower. After all that is done, the game ends with this sorta rushed feeling cutscene. Ed smacks Grog with his stick, which gives Grog a massive hangover apparently. He then rants on about how the pharmacist character from earlier ruined things for him and his fun of tyranny. He then tosses the tonic can before going poof out of existence. Now acquiring the can, Ed takes a moment to fully celebrate what is possibly the first W of his career. Susie appears. Wait, how did she get here? Was she also catapulted? Anyway, Susie and Ed share a moment before the can does... that. Allegedly turning everything in the world back to normal, as said by Susie.
The world is like it was before! Exactly like it was before.
We don't actually see everything turn back, though. The game ends with Susie giving some environmental PSA, as if this is all destined by fate to show mankind the error of their littering ways.
Maybe nature was mad at us, and that can just gave it a chance to get revenge.
Kind of a shoehorned message if you ask me. Lastly, we are given this still image of Ed and Susie hanging out on a restored Earth with Ed still holding the can. I guess the other aliens on the Albatross didn't want it anymore. Speaking of, the can definitely looks a lot different here than it did when we got from Grog. Weird. And that was Tonic Trouble. Playing this again on PC really gave me a newfound appreciation for the game. The Nintendo 64 version felt more like an innocent, silly little outing without much thought put into it. The further context and additions of the PC release paints a different picture. It's a story about an underdog who previously couldn't get anywhere in his life, finding newfound hope in a new world where people don't automatically shun him. He's found friends, a loving partner, a new home where he's treated with respect. Yes, he's made his mistakes, but does he really deserve to be put down and neglected by everybody? Nobody wants to feel as though they're not good enough. I for one see quite a bit of myself in Ed. Always fumbling, rejected by the society I was raised in, and never finding that one special person who truly thinks the world of me. I can only hope I can find the Susie to my Ed sooner rather than later. Preferably not someone who's a one-dimensional snob, but I think that's a given. As a game, though, it's not anything spectacular. But it also isn't that bad either. In fact, I found it to be quite an enjoyable little outing. It's a simple yet solid 3D platformer at its core. It's definitely not without its flaws, but I don't feel these detract too much from the overall experience. The Nintendo 64 version, while very lackluster in comparison to the PC version, is the most easily accessible version to play today. It's still very possible to play the old PC version on modern hardware, you just need to jump through a few hoops to get there. But I think it's worth it. There's also the Special Edition. While the controls and physics are super uncomfortable to utilize, the different and more open level design make it an interesting alternative experience. If you're a fan of Rayman or just platformers in general, I highly encourage you to check out Tonic Trouble. It's a truly fascinating insight into Rayman and Ubisoft's history. I've left links in the description on how to get the PC versions of the game up and running and even a dedicated Discord server for the game. It'd be really cool to have more people to indulge with over this obscure title. But regardless, I'll see you later. Thank you so much for watching the video. Want to be notified when I upload another? Just click the subscribe button and the little bell icon next to it. I'd love for my stuff to be seen by everyone possible.